welcome back.
It's now 7 minutes away from 7 o'clock, and as promised before the break, we're sitting down to talk about biodiversity and a special project that is being undertaken, a 5-year project. And joining us for this conversation, we have Arlene Mejia Young, Director of NPAS. We have Tanya Santos Neal, Project Manager, and we have Project Officer Eugene Way. Good morning, and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Today we're here to talk about the management and protection of key biodiversity areas project in Belize. The project we're here today actually because the project is being launched in Belmopan at the Jaguar Auditorium at the University of Belize. And this project is being awarded through a grant, is being implemented through a grant from the Global Environment Facility. It's a 5-year project of which the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development is the grant recipient, and the Ministry of Forestry, Fisheries and Sustainable Development is actually the key agency that will be implementing the project through its various departments and units. The project is designed in a way to ensure that we strengthen natural resource management and environmental management as well, to ensure that we have a healthy resource base, that we can continue to provide the various socioeconomic benefits that we get from our protected areas and our natural resources. The project unit here will be able to share more about the various components.
Let me ask a question first, because we've had a lot of conversations about protected areas, but when you talk about biodiversity and all of that, it might not be clear as to what that encompasses. So let's start off there when you're talking about maintaining biodiversity, and why should people be concerned about that?
Okay, biodiversity, bio means life, so it's the diversity of life on Earth. And in Belize, we have a wide range we have a high conservation areas that have a wealth of biodiversity. So it includes plants and animals, it includes the habitats, the various ecosystems, we have forest ecosystems, marine ecosystems. So all that comprises those ecosystems.
So all critters everywhere.
All
critters.
And biodiversity also relates to the interactions between those ecosystems. And as we know, those ecosystems provide vital ecosystem services, which provides various benefits to us as humans. It provides support to our well-being. It provides clean water, clean air, and various services that also support healthy industries, the agriculture, the tourism industry. So that, in a nutshell, encompasses the importance of biodiversity to Belize.
Now, how you're working with 6 particular protected areas. How did you decide that those would be the areas of specific focus?
Okay, well, the concept of key biodiversity areas is to maintain areas of high conservation value. And we have identified as a country 3 main nodes, if you want to call it, of key biodiversity areas. There's the northern lowlands, which is close to the Corizal district in that area. There's the Selva Maya, which comprises the large tracts of private land by Rio Bravo, Galanjog, Yalbak. And then there's the Maya Mountains Massif, which includes all the protected areas in that mountain range, and the southern coastal plain areas as well. And so out of those 3 major nodes, we have 32 protected areas within those. But it also includes areas that aren't protected. So we have, out of those 32, we have to select, we have to prioritize. So a set of criteria was developed to determine what would be the best areas to focus on. Those include the high biodiversity concentration, also the multiple uses or the dependence of communities on the area, the importance of the forest to the communities, is there any management taking place in the area, what are the threats to the areas, and so the ones that ranked higher based on those criteria were the ones that were selected.
So they had to be contributing a lot both to the communities, be rich in biodiversity, have some sort of management already in place.
Or none.
Or none. Or you're willing to work with your working
them.
areas that have none.
And are threatened.
And those that are threatened.
Yes.
Of course I asked that because on that list includes the Chiquibowl.
Yes.
Which I think if there's any protected areas that Belizeans in general have been very conscious of and have been learning a lot more about, it has been the Chiquibowl Reserve. Now, the issue with this is obvious that we don't talk as much as FCD has worked very hard to talk about biodiversity. The issue of the incursions has really trumped that. So let's talk about the biodiversity that is existing in these areas, starting with the Chiquibowl. Now, I know you can't give me the whole list, but the highlights. Do you want to?
If you don't mind, the Chiquibowl is one of those, what is the largest protected area in Belize, probably over almost 200,000 acres that is out there. And the Chiquibowl, one of the species that's being protected and is a threat is the jaguar. And the Chiquibowl serves as an ecosystem for the jaguars. We also have the scarlet macaws that are also being threatened by poachers and illegal activity. Beside the Chiquibowl, all the 6 sites that were selected have these different species that are being looked at. For example, the Freshwater Creek Forest Reserve. That also is home to the turtles, what we call hikitis, also the white-tailed peccaries, and they also have the yellowhead parrots, which again has been used as an income generation for some people, which is an illegal activity. We also have like the vaca. Vaca also has as a breeding area for the scarlet macaws. And so all across the different sites, there's different species that are being threatened. And this project will provide mechanisms and mitigating activities to reduce this threat to the different species that are threatened.
Now, when you look at the different areas that you selected, you said you developed a criteria. And immediately when you talk about a criteria and you're talking about communities on the fringes, you're talking about people looking at conservation, survival, development challenges. How do you begin a conversation with people to talk about biodiversity when that's not a word that is in the regular vocabulary to talk about, you know, maybe if you're talking about a particular species, like maybe the hikiti, or they can understand that, but you're talking about the sum total of things and how interconnected they are. How do you begin that conversation?
Well, that is one of the innovative aspects of this project, in that, yes, the focus is on, or one of the focuses on biodiversity itself that's in the forest. And all the protected areas, by the way, are forest ecosystems. Yeah. They're terrestrial protected areas. But very important is we want to get rid of that concept that trees are just for hugging and forests are just for wildlife. But yes, that's
it's
important.
A look, don't touch.
Yeah. We need to get the message across, and the project will look at that as well, that they provide essential services, as Arlene has mentioned. Flood mitigation is a very important one. Food. People use the forest for game meat, for example, hunting. And these things can be done in a sustainable manner. And there are certain protected areas that don't allow these activities, but in order to get community support and participation, we have to involve them. So communities and people in general need to feel the benefit that this area provides, be it ecosystem services or be it tourism. That's another aspect that they can become involved in, to create that sense of ownership.
And that's what came to mind in reading some of your releases, that it feels very reminiscent of what is being done with the archaeological sites. It's the MTB CAS program. Working with the communities that are next to the archaeological sites. So one of the things we don't talk about, you're right, quite often when we talk about reserves, are the communities that are so closely linked to them and how engaged they are, whether or not they're some of your, I hate to use the word perpetrators, but they're the people who perhaps need a bit more awareness as to why these areas are protected. Or are they part of your foot soldiers in terms of being able to maintain the site for what it is? So what are you hoping to build in that relationship?
Just to add further a little bit to what Tanya said earlier, I think the new approach to protection is people-centered.
Yeah.
Because we need the natural resource to provide the livelihoods for the people. So we can't have one and don't have the other. So I think that approach has made some great changes in terms of being people-centered, realize that people need livelihoods. But the overall goal of the project also speaks to natural resource-based growth. So we're seeing this project contributing to economic development, economic growth in the country from a natural resource base.
Yeah.
So we're using our resources sustainably for provide livelihood for the adjacent communities that are direct beneficiaries and people that have lived in this area for years. And that's why the project also have different frameworks to looking at indigenous people or the communities that have lived off these resources. We were in Rancho Dolores last week, and they shared with us people lived off these, whether it's the game meat or off the fish from the river or some, firewood for but they're also conscious as a group that they need to sustain this environment so that they can have long-term use of it. And I think that's what this project is trying to do. Work along with the communities for them to understand that without the resources, you cannot survive. But if you want to survive, then you have to take care of these resources.
Now, is this kind of preaching almost a 360 in terms of the concept? Because for a while, people, I'm talking in the general public discussion area, it was almost like, no, don't touch anything, leave it there. And now you're saying,
or that was the perception that was held.
So how do you not let people go crazy now, saying, oh, it's okay now to go and do whatever? How do you make that switch when it seems like it's a 360 turn?
Well, there are different categories of protected areas, and of the 6 target protected areas here, we have 4 forest reserves, 1 wildlife sanctuary, and 1 national park, which is a Chiquibol.
So let's define those reserve, sanctuary.
Okay. The forest reserves actually do allow extraction, do allow extractive activities under sustainable principles, sustainable forest management. The national parks do not allow extractive activities, but people can participate in either research or tourism activities in the area, recreation. The wildlife sanctuary as well, recreation and tourism are allowed, but no extractive activities. The idea behind, or one of the ideas for the project, is to create that awareness of what the different categories are and what they mean for you on the ground as a community or as a country. And where it's not allowed, find other means, creative ways to get you involved, like tourism. Tourism is allowed. I'll use the example of Spanish Creek Wildlife Sanctuary. The community and the Rancho Dolores Development and Environment Group is very much interested in creating, even the name Environment and Development Group, in creating more income for the community. And so this project can help in strengthening their capacity, strengthening the park or the reserve, the sanctuary itself, to have more tourism activity, thereby increasing more income in the area. In forest reserves, communities can become involved in sustainable extraction of either timber or non-timber forest products, such as shate. You have women in Toledo, for example, who use the jipi japa to make their baskets. Maybe even partnering with private sector or NGOs to build the capacity as well. So the idea is to strengthen the management of the areas to benefit the people who rely on them or who can benefit from it.
So when you talk about strengthening the management system, who will do the policing, and how do you get that to be a part that, will you have fines? Will it be punitive? How do you manage the system when manpower might be a challenge for
Or
example?
has been a
Has
problem.
been. Well, again, that is something that's being planned under this project. We know that enforcement and monitoring is an issue, has been a challenge in the conservation environment. So one of the major outputs of this project is a monitoring and compliance strategy or environmental compliance plans. It may involve, and likely will involve, giving greater authority to communities, because we've recognized that we cannot do it alone. The authorities alone cannot do it. And so to broaden again, increase the involvement of the local stakeholders who actually know and see what's happening before we do. We need to involve them more. We need to strengthen our NGO partners and strengthen that partnership to be able to monitor and enforce as well. We need the public awareness. We need to amend some of the legislation to have larger fines for offenses. And this project is doing all of that. It's a large project. It's $6 million over 5 years.
And it's a grant.
It's a grant. It's looking at legislation.
Nice.
It's looking at improving management on the ground. It's looking at increasing community involvement and participation and ownership. So it's in the different facets of conservation. It's in policy and legislative framework, underground management, institutional organization, assessments, and all of that.
Will any of this money go to the organizations that are currently on the ground? Because as I mentioned earlier, and we do have to acknowledge where the public interest is with the Chicky Bull. Some may say, why not give some of that money to Chicky Bull, because they have been asking for more. To FCD, thank you, to be able to have more rangers, to do more protection. And they're also embarking on a macaw program as well, to be able to protect from those that were being poached. So what would you say to people who ask that question?
Well, first of all, one of the major activities, or one of the outputs of this project, will be the development of management plans.
Okay.
We have, of the 6 sites, some have management plans and some don't. So for those that have some probably that have expired, like the one for FCD, is to redo the plan, make it a bit more modern, up to date, and including now climate change. Climate change is one of the buzz thematic areas that we speak about. Those sites that don't have a management plan, they is to prepare a management plan along with the communities, because as this project is very convinced, we cannot do anything without the inclusion and involvement and the cooperation and endorsement with communities. So it starts off with preparing management plans, and those are some of the things that we will start off as we have prepared already terms of reference to get consultants to come in and prepare the management plans for the Spanish Creek group, and also one for Bacacá. Those are 2 sites that don't have a management plan in place at this moment.
Okay.
So definitely, Chicky Bull is one of the target sites. FCD is its co-manager. We will definitely be working with FCD to prioritize what are the areas that need the financing and need the support to improve the area, the management of the area.
I guess the worry is that parallel systems are not created, and there's a squandering of the resources. So how do you actually get people to feed in? You talk about assessment, but does that include a thorough understanding of what exists in every area and who's doing what and how you can enhance what they're doing?
Okay, as you talk about management of resources, I just wanted to point out that we actually have a partner, which is the Protected Areas Conservation Trust, in implementing this project, and the trust is actually the agency responsible for financial management of the resources of the project. So our funds are flowing to the PAC, to Protected Areas Trust, which will ensure that resources are used in a transparent and accountable manner, as well by government agencies and as well as communities and NGOs that are beneficiary of the project resources as well. So in terms of efficiency of funds, that the funds are being managed by PACT, as well There, in terms of resources flowing to beneficiary agencies, there's actually a part of the project that is designed to allow issuance of sub-projects or sub-grants to NGOs and communities that meet the eligible criteria in the various target areas that we're working with to ensure that livelihoods are being sustained, that options or alternative livelihoods are being identified, supported financially as well. So working with FCD, the other agencies, as well as the communities, will ensure that we have success in implementation.
Can I ask one question? Because one of the challenges, we had a conversation with Wilma here earlier this week, and I think it's an important consideration because very often we're talking about putting in management systems that will impact Belizeans and us moving in from the east. But we know that we have threats and challenges coming from the west. So how do you plan to act? Because sometimes it creates a kind of bitter feeling, like we're not allowed to do this, but you know, there's a pillaging and everything else. So we're protecting and they're consuming. So is there also room within this project to do some cross-border kind of engagement? Because that's a part of what needs to be taken into consideration as well for those that are on the fringes and are between borders.
Well, this project won't finance across the border. It won't but definitely we recognize that the major threat in the Chiquibul is from across the border, and FCD has been doing a very good job of partnering with sister NGOs in those communities to address that issue. So if that continues to be an approach we want to take, then definitely this project would be able to support that. I'd like to mention too, in addition, or to respond to your question about, I think you were leading towards maybe duplication of efforts. The Ministry of Forestry, Fisheries and Sustainable Development is the parent ministry for all of these activities and all of these projects. We recently launched last week, as a matter of fact, the marine component of this project, if you want to call it that. And the National Protected Areas Secretariat is the coordinating body for all of this. So there is that coordination, there is that attempt to avoid duplication of efforts already. So this is not happening in isolation of other activities. It's all in one big plan.
So what have you identified what particular projects or programs you will be undertaking with the funds as yet? And let's talk about some of those.
Okay, maybe I can say there is the only thing that we know that there is a given amount of monies that will be assigned to the sub-project, which is $1.25 million US.
Okay.
But out of the management plans will come the different ideas that will emanate from the communities and partners in development and NGOs and co-managers as to what are the feasible projects. And this will go through a process of first vetting, because we will also be developing what we call the community-based groupings at the community level, where that discussion will start. They will have some vetting of these projects, and then it comes to the technical committee. We have a technical committee will look at the soundness of the project. You know, how can we benefit best from this investment, and then it goes to the PSC. So there is that opportunity for them to, so there is no set recipe. We know it has to do with protected areas, forest management, rehabilitation.
So your management plans come first, and then it'll dictate after that what sub-projects
non-timber, as Tanya said, looking at Chate, looking at the, adding value to fallen trees, etc., etc. So there is no set, but it has to be within the objectives of the project.
What's been the feedback so far? Because it sounds like you've done consultation with the different communities. What's been the feedback?
I think from the communities we've been to and the NGOs, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of expectations. It's necessary. They've always said it's something like this is needed, and essentially a lot of high expectations for us to deliver. So we have to make sure we deliver.
so far in consultations, there's no pushback, but rather an embracing that this is
Correct.
perhaps long overdue?
Yes. And to answer your question as well, Marlene, about the specific activities, the project has 4 components. The first component is supporting forest protection and sustainable forest management, which will be looking at sustainable forestry activities, designing management plans for sustainable extraction of timber and non-timber forest products, getting communities involved in that, developing the management plans for all of those. The second is promoting effective management of key biodiversity areas, which is like developing management plans for the parks, or the park and the sanctuary, and the enforcement and compliance component of that. The third is institutional strengthening and capacity building for enhanced enforcement of environmental regulations. And that's looking at the environmental compliance system, the EIAs, that the
So there will
Department
be a
of the
restructuring
Environment,
of the EIAs,
Well,
the
it would-
EIA process.
strengthening of the process, environmental clearance process. So this project is also looking at the whole legislative framework to ensure that the stage is set to improve the management.
The only area, and I know William mentioned it before, but I just wanted to put an example to it, because the issue of enforcement will definitely be something that has to be addressed. You can have stronger fines, better structures, but illegal and illicit activities will continue to take place. And even with community involvement, if we use the example of Rosewood, you know, the communities were the first one to flag what was taking place, and I will venture to say very little was done in response to it. So how do you work on the enforcement aspect and convince the very same community members that, you know what, you should continue pointing out these things that shouldn't be taking place?
I say we have to think out of the box,
Yeah.
and not take the traditional approach. As I mentioned before, you said it, a lot of times it's the very people in the communities who report these things. So within communities, you have those who, the perpetrators, and you have those who do not support it. And in many instances, we're lucky that there's organized groups such as your village councils, or in Toledo, you have the Alcaldes Association, you have NGOs, you have community-based organizations that we can partner with. Those that are pro-conservation, pro-management, pro-sustainable use, and against the illegal activities. So, yeah, we'd have to think outside of the box and be innovative and creative, and ensure that whatever we design has the legislative teeth to be implemented. And we can do that.
So are we going to say environmental police?
That's the plan. That is the plan. Yep.
They might need a chopper and some drones.
Well,
and
I heard the
you can
chopper
make
is
that
on
all
its
out of
way.
12 million. I don't know.
I think what we need to say is that this project is complementing the work already being done by the ministry, and lots of work that the ministry will have to do even post this project. This project is building on what is there already, so we're not offering cure it all.
Yeah.
We are contributing to what is there already. So there may be some elements that are left out, but are being looked at the ministry level as to some of the other gaps that need to be addressed in the whole protected area system.
Yeah, the synergies are important. My final question just has to do with what you would foresee being the direct benefits, the most obvious that will be in place for those, whether of the communities or those who are currently managing at this point.
Well, for the communities, we expect that 5 years from now, or as the project ends, we will be able to measure quantitatively what the change has been in their income, in their livelihood. So we expect that, for instance, in communities that don't have the capacity to extract in their area, that maybe they will be benefiting from tourism. Yeah. And we will do baseline studies in the beginning stages of the project to determine where they are now and where they are 5 years from now. We can determine that. For the managers of the protected areas, we expect that they will be in a better position, capacity-wise, institutionally, to manage on the ground, to manage the finances to implement management on the ground as well. That the area itself will have benefited from improved management, or at least be on the upswing for improved management. And for the institutions and the government, we expect to have in place improved legislation that responds to the realities of the day, and not something outdated.
Now, before we wrap, because when we talk about very often implementing projects, we know generally of the start date and how much money is, etc. But how will you keep the public engaged? Because I think that has been a part of the challenge when it comes to protection of our natural resources. We know that when the projects begin, but we're not always engaged in the successes, the challenges, the failures, if any, of that particular project, to say that, you know, this might require greater public buy-in or public support. So while there might be monitoring and evaluation as a component of the project itself, there's not always that rollout to make sure that the public is engaged or informed as it progresses. Is there room for that, to have more of the public engagement throughout the 5?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the project falls under the specific unit of the National Protected Areas Secretariat in the ministry, and we had started, I believe, last year to design and implement a communication strategy and plan for the National Protected Areas system, of which this project falls directly under that communication strategy. Through that strategy, we use various case studies and examples from various programs being implemented through the ministry, through the forest department, through the fisheries department, as well as those from projects as well. So through that implementation of that communication strategy, we hope to continue to engage the general public about the importance of their understanding the benefits of our natural resources to their livelihoods, to the country, to the economic development of our country. So we're primarily doing that through our branding campaign for protected areas, and the slogan is nature, culture, life. And those 3 words, in summary, helps us to break it down to the general public about the importance of protected areas to our daily lives, especially the life and the cultural aspect of protected areas. So,
also, during the design of this project, Arlene was wise enough to put an activity for a specific communication strategy for the project. So in addition to the NPAS communications, the project itself has its own that fits into that strategy.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us to talk about this and biodiversity and the project. And it will be launched.
Yes, we invite the general public, our partners, to attend the launch today at the Jaguar Auditorium at the University of Belize. It starts at 2 to 5. So.
All right. Great. And we hope to get updates from you as well, since the project will officially be rolled out. Thank you very much for joining us, and best of luck today with the launch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of Sacred Heart College to talk about their upcoming business fair and expo. Stay tuned.